future child every golden story. She's the woman of the earth, spreading love and joy, fun and laughter. Woman of the earth, making miracles forever after. Loving, caring, working, sharing, teaching, singing, mothering. Woman of the earth. Woman of the earth. Woman of the earth.
Hello, good evening, everyone, wherever you're watching us from, whether in the Philippines or abroad. I hope that you are doing well. The weather is perfect. I can see through my window right now that it's almost nighttime, but not just yet. How are you? Kumusta po kayong nakasubaybay sa amin ngayong gabi? Welcome to another edition of another online event for Miss Philippines Earth 2022. I'm Catherine Vital, and I will be your host/moderator for tonight's very interesting event. You know, we've been through a lot for this past 2 years, actually going 3 years na, with the challenges of the pandemic, plus the very emotional recent elections, plus all the other things that are going on with your life. Kumusta na po ang inyong puso? How is your mental health doing? Tonight, we are going to share the screen this time with a very special resource person, and we are very happy to share with you this session. Hindi lang po para sa ating mga delegates of Miss Philippines Earth, but we are encouraging you to really stay tuned and listen and even participate. Drop in your questions if you will have any as we go through this very interesting session for this evening. So we shall be together for 45 or so minutes this evening, and I assure you that this next hour will be very much worth your time. I know it's a weekend, but it's the perfect time to give this to yourself. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. Our speaker is a multi-talented international performing artist. Maybe you've seen her in one of our Miss Earth pageants perform. She's also a producer, triathlete, motivational speaker, and resilience coach. She has performed on stages across over 100 countries and 6 continents for various productions, races, events, and advocacies. As founder of the Fuel to Flourish community, she is currently producing creative content, motivational workshops, documentaries, and inspirational music for her mission to empower stress resilience and social support within communities. She is also the creator of Metro Channel's brand new inspirational wellness show, Born for This. Ladies and gentlemen, virtual applause for Elle Adda. Hi, Elle.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that. Such a warm introduction, and I'm so happy to see all the beautiful faces here. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share with you. This is not something I don't assume to be your stress guru or the expert on all things mental health, but these practices, these lessons, this insight, this awareness is what has changed my life, as well as many members in our community. And I believe that when you discover something such as stress resilience, such as community support, such as mental health, then you don't just keep it to yourselves. You do your part and you share it to the people around you. And so Fuel to Flourish, our organization, is teamed with the mental health organization Mind You. And our mission is to help 1 million Filipinos overcome stress, anxiety, and depression by 2025. But what do we mean by mental health? Mental health isn't just the absence of disease or a problem. We often think that mental health is associated with something wrong with us or a weakness or that we're crazy. And this is often what gets in the way of us becoming mentally healthy. In the same way that if you are a physically healthy person, it's not just that you don't have issues, it's that you are able to access your strength and your full body's capabilities to perform better, to enrich whatever it is that you're doing. In the same way, mental health isn't just about getting by, but it's about being able to access all of our faculties to be able to handle challenges, to be able to support ourselves through those challenges, but to also grow resilient and to learn from it so we can adapt to those challenges for ourselves and the people around us. So I want to thank you so much for joining this. Apart from the tools that we're going to learn together about stress resilience, which is simply about not just being able to cope through when we experience stress, when we experience anxiety or depression, or when we experience that agitation, but to be able to respond to it so we don't react, and to develop kind of like an endurance or a stamina or a certain resilience to stress so that we become stronger. And when we are able to access our faculties or bring ourselves into a mental state of balance, even in the midst of stress, what happens is we have more access to our creativity, our intelligence, to our resources, to our talents. And so before we start things off, because I believe that mental health is really a combination of how the mind, the body, the environment all work together. And it's not just one fixed thing. Our physical health is also dependent on our mental health. Stress affects everything from how we feel, how we think, to how we perform, to how we greet other people. And so sometimes we can hack into mental health with use of the body. We're going to learn a little bit more about this in just a second. But just to kind of get things started, I'd like to ask everyone to stand up and keep your videos on. That's right, ladies. I'd like to ask everyone to just kind of stand up, keep your videos on, and stand up in place. There you go. And right here, I just want to challenge us to get outside of the box a little bit, get out of our heads, get into our bodies, and just shake it out a little bit. Whatever you came into the session with, distractions, your plans for Saturday night, who you're seeing, or what, an expectation or your to-do list, you can leave that to the end of the class and fully commit to a little bit of a practice together. So just shake it out and just stand here, bringing your feet about hip width apart. I'd like you to inhale and bring your hands behind your head, interlace the fingers and place them behind your neck and really push against your fingertips with your neck. And I want you to peel your elbows further back and almost like you're squeezing a pencil in between your shoulder blades. I want you to relax the shoulders back and down, and I want you to start breathing from the lower belly here. Imagine filling your lungs across all four corners. On your exhale, I would like you to sigh. Inhale, reach the chest a little bit more forward. Complete that breath in. On your exhale, notice all the sensations in the body. Notice how the temperature changes. Release all the air from the lungs. Again, inhale here. Open the chest up even more. Feel all that sensations, the tingling. Just be present here on your exhale. Last one. Really let that exhale go as long as you can, like it's a contest. Whoever continues exhaling, the longer wins. So longer exhales. Release all the air from your lungs. And relax the hands down. And right here, just begin to breathe normally. And just pay attention to all the people who are in the screen that you see standing, who are paying attention to the video right now. And I'd like to welcome each of us, not just you, including myself, to challenge ourselves, to dare ourselves to be a little raw and maybe a little vulnerable during this session, to lay it out all in front of us. So that what is the reason? What is the why that you would like to bring into this practice? Why did you show up to this session? What will stress resilience do to help you? What will it do to help the things that you love, to the people around you? Why is it that you're actually here? And really let that sink in for a bit. Appreciate being here giving yourself the opportunity to practice. And let's appreciate one another as well for sharing this practice with one another. Take another deep breath in here. Sigh it out. Excellent. And when you're ready, you can slowly come back to your seated positions on your chairs. So we like to get the body involved, as you'll learn a little bit more later on, because there is a direct link between our thoughts, between the physical sensations in our biology in the body, as well as how we react to other people. So simple practices like what we just did allow us to bring a little bit more flood of oxygen and even some hormones and neurotransmitters that allow us to get into a peak state while we control the breathing, slower, deeper, fuller breaths, maybe a little bit of which massages the vagus nerve. This brings us into what's called a more balanced or coherent state, a more calm state, a more present state. The reason why it's important for us to learn these different ways or skills or tools to access our state is because when we get into a state of stress, what happens? What's the first thing that goes out the door? Ano kaya? Let's put it in our chat box. What's the first thing that goes out the door when we get stressed? Our decision making. And so the decision making, we think tayo yung may problema. It's my fault because I'm stupid or I'm not good enough. And so I make a bad decision. Oftentimes, no, it's because we decided to react in a state of incoherence or imbalance or stress. So we're going to learn a little bit more about this. And I'm so happy to actually have the honor of sharing with you, because I really believe that each of you ladies have the resource and the talents of owning a stage and being able to command your spheres of influence. And at the end of the day, you are ambassadors for the environment. But what is the environment without the people who are living in it? And so the best way that we can serve is to make sure that our cups are full first, to be able to serve and share not only our time, but also our experience. And our own experience with mental health, it's not something we like to share with one another. We're not used to doing it. We like to put on a pretty face or a nice feed. I say we because, that's what we do. You put it on post. You want everyone to know about how well you're doing. You very rarely talk to someone about how poorly you're doing, because there is a stigma. What are they going to think? Because there's something wrong with being challenged. And that's the thing I want to break with us today. And now, I don't claim to be your guru. I don't claim to know what you're going through. Every single person has their own thing. All I can say is that I understand that, especially you ladies being under the spotlight, there are certain stress triggers or stimulus that comes with that. But it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. If you're under the spotlight, you have a great power. It also comes with great responsibility. You are going to be in an environment where you will be challenged. Your confidence will be challenged. Your esteem will be challenged. Not just you, but everyone else. It's not about escaping that. That's not the problem. I used to think that was the problem, because I grew up in an environment that was completely centered around success and achievement. My grandmother's the Philippine national artist for music. They didn't mean to, project that on me, but I took it on myself. And because I wasn't aware of how to interpret my thoughts and my feelings, I misunderstood the stimulus around me. And I thought that meant I had to prove something. I had to be excellent, and that my measure or value or worth was based on how I could perform. And that's a recipe for disaster. By the way, who here ever feels like that? Sometimes that you feel that pressure, that insecurity. I'd like you to raise your hand if you feel that and type yes in the chat box, but just raise your hand. If you feel that sense of what are people going to think, or what if I'm not going to be good enough, or what if they critique me, then what does that mean? Or, oh, they're much better at what it is than I am. Or what if they succeed and I don't, then I'm out of a place. Then, oh, what do I have to do? Maybe I shape myself. What will they like? What will they like? You start judging yourself. And so all of a sudden you start overcompensating. You lose direction because we prefer to please others, because that's what we think we need. We don't know how to listen to ourselves. We can't access our true seats of power or our true strengths. And we don't like to share it with others because we don't want to be judged for not having the answers. When we're not supposed to have the answers. We are not supposed to have it right all the time. That's not reality. That's perfection. And that's the lowest standard, because it doesn't exist. And so it is a natural thing. Everyone's got their hand raised. I see like 10, 20, 30. If you saw that many hands raised to like an investigation for a murder, you'd probably be like, that's enough evidence. That's pretty feasible. So why is it that we have such a hard time dealing with these experiences? Now, the problem isn't stress. It's not stress. It's our reaction to it. Because ladies, everyone says they have these flurry or feelings of, insecurity where you have to compensate. How does that make you feel about yourself? Type it in the chat box. How does it make you feel about yourself? How does that make you feel about yourself when you're feeling those thoughts? Just type it in the chat box right now. For me, it makes me feel, you feel tired, exactly. It makes me feel overwhelmed and not capable. I feel disappointed, not enough, sad or pressured, exhausted, unworthy, okay? Drained, there you go, disappointed. And so when we feel these things, how do we usually react? How do we usually react when we feel this? You feel like you need to prove yourself to people. Amen. Angono Rizal. Baby, Angono, I don't know if I got your name right. Can you unmute yourself? That's very, very, thank you so much for sharing that, because that's so spot on. Does anyone else here feel like sometimes you have to prove yourself? Yeah. So Angono, how does that show up for you? Like, is there a specific trigger that makes you feel like that? Or like, if you don't, like for me, for example, it's almost like if I'm not, if I don't have something to show, then it feels like I'm not measuring up, or I need to get people to validate what I'm doing. How does that show up for you when you say, you feel like you need to prove yourself to people?
Feels like every time that I'm doing something, I have to be at my best. And sometimes I feel like I was very pressured because of the people around me. I mean, what's their opinion about what I'm doing? And maybe I'm not good enough in this specific situation. And it's really saddened me sometimes because my confidence in myself is sometimes I felt like I wasn't good enough into one specific area, and I really have to improve to prove people that I am at my best. So yeah,
it's exhausting, isn't it?
Yes, it's really exhausting, and it is something that sometimes I just distract myself with other things, but there are just possibilities that you cannot avoid to feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is exactly what this session is all about. And you're absolutely right. You can distract your things, and sometimes it's a good idea to distract yourself if it's too much, but it's only going to keep coming around if we don't deal with the issue. And this whole session is all about being able to respond to the stimulus rather than work around it. Because what you're saying is you're experiencing these feelings and like you feel like you have to prove yourself, but it is a thought and an emotion. Do you actually want to prove yourself, Anga? You can just unmute yourself. Do you want to prove yourself?
Yes, sometimes I really want to prove myself.
Okay, and we'll talk about a little bit more why that is. But that is the thought or the narrative that you have to get a validation from others. That's how it feels. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I totally resonate with that. Thank you so much, Angona. And so it's these experiences try to make us behave in certain ways that are outside of just being ourselves, just being our authentic self. It's not good enough. And so we have to overcompensate. I see some things here that says, you don't want to do anything anymore because of the disappointment. This is Maria Lourdes. So it kind of like stops you from actually putting yourself out there. Maria Lourdes, when you say it just discourages you from doing things, like what things?
Like, for example, if I want to do certain things, example, like working at home. So I feel like I don't want to work anymore. I just want to stay in my room and to be quiet and cry all day, all night. And I
Yeah.
felt like I'm a loser. I'm not good enough like the others. So it's better for me to just stay in my room, in a quiet room, and not to do anything, because I felt like if I do something, I feel that I will fail again.
Mm.
The feeling.
Guys, like, let's just acknowledge, I have to honor you, Maria Lourdes, all of our speakers this evening, because this isn't easy to talk about. But the fact that you're talking about it is the first step. The fact that we're opening this conversation up is the first step to detaching ourselves, who we are, to how we're feeling. Because like what you're saying, Maria Lourdes, you're experiencing these thoughts and these emotions and you feel demotivated, right? You feel like you don't have the energy to move or do anything. And the story is, well, it's not going to be good enough. And so it's almost like it's feeding back the thinking and the feeling and the thinking and the feeling. And sometimes all you want to do is cry. I think I found myself doing that a couple of weeks ago. I was just so overwhelmed that I was just like, wala nang pakialam, I'm just going to cry, or I'm going to eat my feelings, or whatever it is. And the point that I'm saying this is, like, when we're in these states, we end up making decisions that are not actually based off of our values, but we end up acting that way because it's a defense mechanism, because of fear of judgment, fear of not being enough. But the stress is actually not the problem. The problem is that we identify with the stress. What do I mean by that? That means when I think these thoughts and I have this feeling of not being worthy and I have low energy and I don't want to put myself out there, it means that I am unmotivated. It means that I am uncreative. It means that I am unable. It means that I cannot do this, when it's actually just how we think and how we feel. I know that's a little crazy to think, but how else can you explain why, who here has a beautiful girlfriend who is so beautiful on the inside and out, but they can't seem to see themselves clearly? They think of themselves as ugly, or they think of themselves as unworthy. Let that be testimony to the things, the thoughts, the emotions are not real. Their thoughts, their memories we pick up. We're going to learn a little bit more about what that is. We're going to talk about a little bit about the science, because I believe it's important to understand the science so that you can trust the practice. But the problem is not stress. It's that we think that it's real and we identify with it, or we react to it. So we end up feeding into it, because the only thing that actually stops us is fear. If you don't have enough money, if you're not smart enough, you don't have the resources or the right contacts, guess what? You can make all those things. You can learn all those things. The only thing that stops us is fear. And the solution is not to run away from fear or avoid it. It's to learn how to adapt to it. And so the main objectives that we're going to learn together during this session are: one, to practice mind-body awareness, which means to be aware of how we think and how we feel, and even the energy in the body. Because who here, when you get really stressed out, your temperature becomes, high, your heart palpitates, the breathing. To practice mind-body awareness is to notice all of these things without judgment, without attaching to it. So learning how to detach from it. The second skill we're going to learn is coping strategies, because when we're going through the tornado or the rabbit hole where you can't peel yourself out, there are simple coping strategies like what we did at the beginning of the session, mindfulness or breathing, that'll help us balance the nervous system so that we can start thinking clearly. And the third is the invitation that I am extending to you, which is to practice breaking this stigma that we have with vulnerability or mental health. And the way that we do that is by sharing our experiences, by sharing our vulnerabilities, not because I want to tell you how sucky I feel, but because the more that I share with you, that even to this day, after, you think I'm a teacher, a coach, but the more that I share with you that I still wake up with palpitations, that when I'm about to give a presentation, I still have thoughts that judge if what I'm doing is actually going to be received well. Even when a great day is going, or I think that everything's going right, I still have feelings of wondering, what is that person thinking of me? And should I do something about it? It is a natural human condition. But the more that I talk about it, the more I disassociate myself from the fact that there's anything wrong with it. It's just happening. And it's a normal human experience. And the more that I give myself permission to feel that way and think that way, the more, or the less insecure I become when it happens. And the more I give others permission to feel and think that way as well. And so by you guys sharing, who here, when you heard the share of Maria Lourdes or any of the shares that we're going to have during the session, who here felt a little encouraged? Not because you were encouraged by her pain, but you were encouraged because you felt like you're not alone. You resonated with her. Parang tinik na nawawala. Absolutely, tinik na nawawala. It's almost like there's a little bit of ease. Because as soon as we realize that this is something we all experience, then it's not a bad thing. If it's not a bad thing, then we can learn to control it. We can learn to be around it. So the opportunities that this is going to give us is what happens when we're not as stressed enough anymore. Opportunity is we're going to be able to think clearly. We're going to have more access to our authentic talents and what we believe is right for us and listening to what we're passionate about, which is what we're going to be better at. We'll have more clarity, more direction, more resilience. And from there, we'll be able to perform better, interact with one another better. And everything else really stems from how we see ourselves. And we cannot see ourselves clearly if we keep identifying or believing every single thing we think and every single thing we feel. So the first thing is, first and foremost, are we ready to do this, guys? Yeah? Are we ready to learn a little bit about how to detach from those voices, those experiences, how to use them to get stronger, and how to actually access our true seat of power? Are we ready to do that? Yes? Thumbs up? Yes? All right, let's do this. So the first step is practice mind-body awareness. So let me just expose you to a little bit of the science, just so you understand what stress is. Because sometimes we don't understand. Because when we went to school, hindi tayo tinuruan. We were taught what to think, how to do things well, but no one told us how to deal with the internal emotions and thoughts that confuse us from doing things well. So this is what we're doing, guys. Okay. So what is the stress response? Stress response is completely normal. It is actually our biological automatics, which means you can't control it. It's a reaction to make the body fight or flight to survive. So if you look at the nervous system, there's two main roles. One is rest and digest. That's our relaxation. The second is fight or flight, which means what happens when you're in a state of stress, the body allocates all its resources to surviving. What does that mean? What that means is it actually affects everything when we're stressed. It affects our biology as well, not just our thoughts. So what happens when we're stressed is our nervous system becomes erratic or imbalanced. Our heart rate begins to palpitate, get faster. Our breathing becomes shallow and constricted. And then all of a sudden we produce hormones like adrenaline, cortisol. And what this does, it makes our brain waves more incoherent or imbalanced, all because we need to be on edge. What is happening in the brain here? Let me just show you a little slide just so you can see just what's happening. Okay, so do you guys see this? Thumbs up. You see the slide? Okay, so this is what happens to the brain when you get stressed. Normally, this is the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that's in charge of all the higher reasoning, the part of your brain that's in charge of, logic and your ability to control your thoughts and your emotions. When you're stressed, what happens? An overload of hormones or stress hormones or cortisol, what it does is it inflames the amygdala, which is part of threat detection. So all of a sudden, you just have so much nonstop negative bias thoughts. Anyone here ever feel like sometimes you're in that state of stress where hindi mo matigil, no matter what you try to do, everything you think, everything that person says, everything that happens just pisses you off or just makes you more scared. It's like, it's not rational. It's called amygdala hijacking. And so what happens when your amygdala is flared up, all you see, parang may filter, it's all bad news, yo. And then what happens is it shuts down this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. And so then you can't think clearly. So anyone here ever been so stressed that you just couldn't think clearly? Made you feel a little stupid? I feel that all the time. So what happens is because we think about 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, that's human beings. What happens is all of a sudden when we're stressed, all of those thoughts become negative. And if we don't know how to filter through what's real, we start believing what we're thinking, but it's not us that's choosing those thoughts. We pick it up. We're going to learn a little bit more where we pick that up from in just a bit. But what happens is we think those thoughts. For example, if I'm about to start a performance, I used to have crazy stage fright. I used to get panic attacks. My anxiety would go through the roof. And so the thoughts are, I'm going to screw this up. Don't screw this up. Don't screw this up. And so that's making me feel more anxious. It's making me have feelings of fear. And what's that doing? It's increasing or feeding my stress, which is only going to increase and feed the thoughts of, shit, we're screwed. But that's because, what is this? It's called the thinking feeling loop. I'm not interrupting it, because what do we do if we react to fear? We worry, we ruminate. Who here has ever stayed in bed or just like completely zones out because your brain was just attached to a problem? Yeah. Okay. I see. I'm gonna pull you up, babe. Sorry, okay. Seth Cruz says, I saw you raise your hand there. So what is, when you have the thinking feeling loop, can you give me an example of what that feels like? For me, it's when I'm like what I mentioned, it's like stage fright, right? Or performance anxiety. How does it show up for you?
Well, I have been overthinking for so long. These things manifest as a sign of pressure, of overwhelming pressure of trying to prove my worth. So sometimes it can it can be shown in the way I speak. For example, my voice crack. I'm a bit nervous as I'm speaking right now because this has been quite a touchy subject for me. And just to share with everyone, I actually have chronic depression. I had a session with a psychiatrist last year, and though it was not fully confirmed, based on what she said, it appears I do have. I have been feeling this for so long, and aside from the crushing pressure, a voice crack, it's the twitching. It's the twitching of yourself, basically shaking, and your voice, everything else, your entire body just shakes and you cannot control it. So those are just one of the many things that I constantly feel.
What do you think what skill or ability do you think would allow you to get through those experiences or get stronger from it, you think?
I have read in the messages here with my other delegates, they try to distract themselves with work or with something that they want, that we feel can take off our minds from the stress that we're feeling from within. So a good distraction would be work or sports or getting in tune with nature. It's just finding your peace of mind through the things you like, the things you enjoy doing.
Absolutely. And first and foremost, thank you so much for sharing that. I honor your bravery. And I believe that the world would be a better place if more people spoke about what they experience, because I find great comfort in you sharing your vulnerability. So thank you for that. You mentioned doing things to distract. Now, that is helpful, like what we said, but the harder part is like what you think is you can't control the twitching. Like your thoughts are going on its own, your emotions are on its own, your body temperature goes up, your heart palpitates, your voice gets high. People used to think I had Tourette's. I used to like have twitches like, and they used to see me my neck do that, or I whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong. I was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder. My fiance diagnosed with depression as well. There's nothing even wrong with being in those states. There's a reason for why we get into those states. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the whole point of this practice is that we can openly share about it. So bravo you. But then so that we can interrupt the cycle. That's the main thing I want us to learn and get out of this, is to learn that we have control. We were never taught that we do actually have control to change the brain. It's called neuroplasticity, which means through practice, effort, and a little bit of exercises, you can change the brain so that you can control your focus. So that when you get into those states, you can calm the heart rate and the nervous system down so that you can detach, or the prefrontal cortex has time to turn back on and you can be charged of reasoning. It's still going to be hard, but that's where the juice is. And I'm so excited for you, Sess, for this practice, because it's gonna give you a lot of power. If anyone's going through those deep states where you're really struggling with a mental condition, if you choose to practice it, it will be your greatest source of strength. I promise you. It is why I am here and I feel passionate, is because of experiencing that dark side. It's why my fiance is as resilient as he is, and how I believe that you, Sess, will be as resilient as you will be, is because of going through this and being able to actually work through it. And you mentioned like being stuck in that thinking, feeling through of shame and unworthiness, and actually thinking that's you, and identifying and thinking that's you. But what's happening is we're just being triggered. What does that mean? When we are triggered by stress, we have involuntary experiences, which means it's not our choice. It comes up of the thoughts, the emotions, the body, even the hormones, and how we behave. And so who here has ever been into an argument or was so irritable or stressed out talking to someone, and it made you lash out and say something mean, or, be, a version of yourself that you just didn't quite like, and you saw it and you're like, wow, is that me? That's not you either. That's not us. Your thoughts, your emotions, and even your behaviors in those states are not us. The minute we stop judging ourselves for how stress makes us think, feel, and behave, the more we have room to actually respond to it. But because if we're always judging ourselves or identifying with how we think, feel, and act, we're screwed, because none of us gets by, smooth sailing. I don't care how clean our Instagram feed is. I struggle with it on a day-to-day basis, but the struggle is now something that I can enjoy and appreciate, because the more that we can practice, the more you release yourself with that identity that you think is you, the lower self-esteem version of you, the more you can make room and realize who you actually are. So I'm gonna put up on the screen, and I'd like you to just have a look at this photo, and I'm just gonna show you what the chain of events or reaction is like when we are in these stress states, or when we're triggered by stress. First and foremost, actually, can you write down on the chat box what triggers your stress? A trigger means that when you're around this person or around this kind of circumstance or this kind of event, that's usually the environment that's your trigger. So for me, it's anything performance related. For me, a stress trigger is also when people get in the way of my plans. I can, the controlling aspect of, or my expectations aren't met, or I don't do as well as I would like. When my schedule is not followed. Okay, keep writing that down. Sometimes my mother can be a trigger as well. Or situations when someone is giving me, criticism for my work, that can be a big trigger. Multitasking, being overwhelmed, many things happening at once, deadlines, yes. Responsibilities, failure of meeting those responsibilities, criticism, when someone shouts at you. So what happens here is, when we get triggered by the stress, the body will have an involuntary or automatic action. What you choose to do with that reaction is your responsibility. However, we cannot help that the body will react and make us behave in certain ways that sometimes we don't want to. What do I mean by this? So I'm going to show you. Okay. So I've got this thing right here. It's called the cognitive triad. And what this means basically is, when we get triggered by stress, these are involuntary reactions. So I just want you to write down in the chat box, just get used to what thoughts, when you get triggered by the thing that you wrote down there, what usually, how is the mind? How does the mind feel for you? So just type it in the chat box. So for me, it's negativity. What comes up in the mind when that trigger happens? When there's too many deadlines, you're scattered. It doesn't have to be what's on this page. You can come up with your own thing. What happens in the mind? Okay. I worry or ruminate, which means my brain just overthinks. Yep. Become forgetful. Headaches. Oh, okay. I see a headache here. So what? Let's move on to this negativity. Yeah. So what happens here is the body goes through a biological response. Remember, your nervous system is going to go haywire. Your heart rate's going to elevate. You're going to have different hormones. Your brain waves are going to, your brain is literally functioning differently. It's impaired. So then what happens in the body is you're in a state of stress. So the body starts, what are the common reactions that you feel here? I feel breathless. On the top left, what does the body show? Does anyone here feel like aches and pains in their back or their neck or their shoulders? I feel tension in the body, breathless. I actually get skin irritations. I get, and I do twitches. Super exhausted, okay, headaches. And then what emotions would you feel normally when that trigger happens and you think these thoughts and your body is feeling that way? Sometimes I just feel like tired. And so I feel discouraged or defeated, like I'm like useless or that I can't do anything or incapable. Or I feel lots of confidence. You always cry. Yeah. I end up like feeling like I'm a victim, feel disappointed, hopeless. And when you feel these things, what is usually the behavior? How does it make you act? So anyone here have a vice? I have had so many vices. So what I've done, how that's made me act is, yes, unmotivated. Sometimes I like to stay in bed forever. Or I've had so many vices. So how that's made me act is, guys, you can just mute yourselves. Procrastinate, okay? And then if you procrastinate, what else do you do? I drink more, I worry more, or I get busy, or I put more things on my schedule, or I try to please people. And so the reason why I'm asking us to begin identifying these things is so that you can be aware of when you're triggered. Because the whole point of being aware of when we're triggered is to be able to do something about it. To be able to do something about it when we are triggered, okay? So it doesn't mean that we're not going to feel triggered. It doesn't mean that we're not going to experience challenges or it's not going to be overwhelming. I'm sorry, we're a human being. As long as you are alive, you will experience fear. As long as you are alive, you will experience fear. That's not the problem. Stress is not the problem. It's how we're reacting or responding to it. Because if we keep doing these things, if we have the thought when the trigger happens, like we're insecure, and then we get the reactions in the body, and then the emotions follow. If we behave in a way that makes it, that our thoughts and our feelings are making us behave, what are we doing? We're feeding the loop. And how do we know how habits work? The more we do things on a regular basis, the more automatic it becomes. Which means if we are so used to feeding into the fear and reacting and behaving in fearful ways, the more automatic it will be and the more we have no control over it. So how do we create a new habit? Which means the next time we experience it, we introduce a new behavior. So the next time we experience the trigger, now that you know what it looks like, what the mind does, what the body, the emotions, how you behave, now how do we interrupt the cycle? So this next part is all about adaptive coping. Maladaptive is unhelpful, which is, distracting ourselves or having a vice or drowning it out or running away. Adaptive is learning how to be with the discomfort, learning how to be with the challenge and become more resilient to it, like be okay with it. Because the more that we see and recognize that the story in our head is just a story and it's not real, the more we can be okay with it being there. The only reason why we're stuck with it or we keep thinking about it is we think it's real. The more that we can just let it be and just observe it and accept it, the more it naturally passes. So this is where I'd like to teach us a brief practice on mindfulness. Now, if you've ever learned about mindfulness, it's not always about meditating and sitting in a pretzel or a seated position. Mindfulness is simply a focus exercise. And it is the ability for you to become aware and to notice and to observe what you're thinking and feeling without attaching to it. So again, mindfulness is the ability to become aware of how we're thinking and feeling. Like, okay, I'm thinking anxious thoughts right now. I'm feeling these crazy emotions, but not attaching to it, which means I'm not saying, oh, I'm going to suck, or it's going to be bad, or it's not, that's not, the voice isn't me. It means that when I'm feeling anxiously, I'm not saying I'm afraid. No, it's just that I'm noticing all of this, but I'm not attaching to it. This is just something my body is going through. It's not me. So how do you do that? Because that's really what allows us to process fear and anxiety, is not reacting and not attaching. Because the more we attach and react, the more we're proving to ourselves that there's something that we should be insecure about. But the more that we allow these thoughts and emotions pass, or the more that we learn how to surf these waves of discomfort with our focus and the way that we control our breathing, the more we prove to the nervous system that there's no reason to be insecure. And the more the nervous system learns, and we build the habit of not always emotionally reacting to things. So mindfulness is, the practice can be very, very simple in the sense that it's about focusing on one thing. In this case, we're going to focus on the breath, just breathing. And then when, not if, but when we get distracted to a thought, whether it's distraction, a to-do list, or it's an anxious thought, when we get distracted to a thought, just observing it. Just, okay, this is just a thought. And not judging it, not attaching it, it's not me, it's just a thought. It's just an experience. So when you notice you get distracted, you let it go, you let it be, you accept it, and then you come back, bring your focus to the breath. And you just do this over and over and over. You get distracted, notice you get distracted, don't judge yourself, come back to the breath. Get distracted, notice you get distracted, don't judge yourself, come back to the breath. What this is teaching you is to control your focus, even when your focus gets distracted or gets pulled to something such as stress, anxiety, and depression. And the best way to do this is, one, every day. I noticed a huge difference when I just started practicing 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day. And over time, this actually changes your brain. The more you can actually learn how to redirect your focus and control your breathing. What this is doing is it's slowly building new connections in your brain so that you can detach from your feelings and your thoughts, and you can control your thoughts and your feelings. Yes, my friends, we can control it. The only reason why it's so hard is because we've never been taught we weren't taught how to control it. So it's always going to be hard, like reading for the first time in the beginning, but this does get easier and easier. And this is just one of those things. It's a lifelong practice for me. I highly recommend it. It's honestly the one practice that's really changed my life. So the way that we're going to learn this is we're going to do what's called a stop intervention. So the next time you get triggered, I challenge you to practice the stop intervention. As soon as you feel those emotions, the thoughts, you want to react, stop what you're doing. Remove yourself, stop. There's no point thinking or doing anything because it's not going to be what you want. You're going to react or maybe behave in a way that you don't want. So letter T stands for take slow, deep breaths to regulate your nervous system. So we're going to do a little thing called box breathing. Box breathing is a military, breathing exercise that helps people in high pressure environments calm their nervous system. Because again, guys, if your nervous system is not calm, what happens? The brain waves are crazy. The amygdala is flaring up. So much negative thoughts. You can't use the part of your brain you need to use. So the first thing is damage control. As soon as you get triggered, regulate your nervous system. And then think of the problem. But first, regulate your nervous system. Step number 1, take deep, full breaths. Then observe your attention and try not to judge it. Just be okay with whatever you're thinking, with whatever you're feeling. Try not to suppress it or resist it or hide it. Just learn to coexist with it, like you're paying attention to it. This is going to take practice, guys. Only 6 months into my meditation practice did I start seeing crazy results. crazy results, like my productivity, my relationships, my ability to snap myself out of deep depressive states. But it takes practice because we're not used to using that muscle. It's called metacognition or mindfulness. We're not used to seeing things or experiencing things without attaching to it. We're usually always in the first person. So observe your attention, observe how you feel, and just not have an opinion about it. Just let it be. Don't do anything with it. That's the hardest thing, diba? Not doing anything. Don't react, just be. And then letter P stands for proceeding, after we've just observed things, proceeding to focus on our intention. Now, I recommend the intention of our focus is always on what we have and what we can control. Because many times when we're stressed, what do? We focus on the things we can't control and focus on the things that we don't have. We focus on the future or on the past. The three main power focal points is focus on the present moment. Be okay with whatever's happening. Focus on what you do have, the resources you do have, and what we can control. And then when we get distracted to the fear again, it's okay. Let it be and practice bringing it back. So it's constantly a practice of getting distracted and coming back. Distracted, coming back. Distracted. It's never perfect. So the way we're going to do this is I'd like to just invite you to sit down and just place your hands on your lap and begin to just breathe normally here. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes if you like. If that's something that is uncomfortable, you can keep it slightly open. But just begin to be aware of your breath right now. Focus on how the body feels as you inhale, the different sensations in the body as you exhale. And just think of a moment when you are triggered, that person or that circumstance that causes this reaction inside you to feel stressed or restless or anxious. Try and remember, how does it feel in the body when you're in that state, feeling displaced or out of it or not in control? And I'd like you to practice letting that feeling be. Letting it be. Even though you want to change it, even though you feel like doing something like worrying or distracting yourself, just practice letting it be. And take deep, full breaths in and out through your nose. We're going to inhale for 4 counts. We're going to hold the breath for 4. We're going to exhale for 4 counts. And then we're going to hold the breath for 4 counts. So inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. What this is going to do is going to slowly bring our nervous system back to balance so we can control our focus. Release all the air from your lungs. And begin inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale all the air from your lungs. 4 and hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale from the lower belly. 3, 4. Hold it at the top, but don't clench. 3, 4. Exhale. Feel the body soften. And hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. Pull the focus on the breath. And hold. Even if you get distracted, that's okay. Come back. And exhale. 2, 3, 4. And hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. There's nothing else expected of you right now. And hold. Just breathe. 3, 4. Exhale. Notice the sensations in the body. Pay attention to the present moment. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. And relax. Breathe normally here. Continue to focus on the breath. And when your mind drifts off to a train of thought, which is often, we don't even notice that our minds get drifted off to a train of thought. It just happens. But every time you notice that you've been distracted, just observe where the mind is. Maybe you think silently, thinking or planning. Just try and observe it without judgment. And gently bring your attention back to the breath. And continue to do this over and over. The more we practice, the more we become aware of the nature of the mind. That the mind is constantly wandering without our permission or without our control. That often the mind is filled with things that we did not even choose, ideas and opinions of others. The more we practice, the more that we see that we don't have to subscribe to every thought that comes up. But we can simply notice where our attention is, how we feel, and be okay. Knowing that we can simply control our breathing and bring our focus back to what we believe. So what is your intention? When you open your eyes, how can you focus more on the present moment? On what we have? And what we can control. Place your hands on your heart and keep your eyes closed. And begin to breathe into the area of your heart, like you're inhaling oxygen into that heart center. Feeling the heart expand on the inhale, and feeling it soften on the exhale. Knowing that when we feel even discomfort, we can just notice the sensations and what the emotion feels like, rather than saying, I feel depressed, or I am anxious, or I am panicked. Can we separate the story from the physical experience? I feel tension in my body. I feel a rising of temperature. I feel tingling sensations. I feel blood rushing. The more we begin to practice bringing our focus to what is actually happening in front of us, the more we can let go of constantly reacting to this story in our head about what's happening. And the less we occupy our minds with fear, the less we react to it, the more we can focus on what truly matters. How we can learn, how we can grow, and how we can give. So again, breathe into that area of your heart, like you're breathing a little bit of gratitude into that heart. Maybe a little bit of gratitude even for experiencing a challenge, knowing that with a little bit of practice, with a little bit of breathing, with a little bit of changing our focus, over time, we're slowly getting stronger. We're slowly shedding that old skin and insecurity. We're slowly becoming more of ourselves. And the more we become ourselves, the more we have clarity on how we can show up in the world. So breathe that in, breathe that gratitude. This is the lifelong journey, one step at a time. Take another deep breath in here. Sigh it out. You can repeat after me if you like. As you breathe these words into your heart, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't control, like my thoughts or my emotions, so that I can take courage over what I can, like how I choose to respond. Take another deep breath in here and sigh it out. Release the hands from your heart and slowly open your eyes. So anyone here feel a little bit more calm, feel a little bit more centered? Yeah, just raise your hands if you do. I just want to show you a little something of what's actually happening to your nervous system, to your heart, and to your brain during these meditations. So a couple of things that we did: box breathing, inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, as well as the sigh, the that massages the vagus nerve. The box breathing slows the heart rate and the nervous system down. And what's actually happening here, oh my goodness, I'm not sure if you can see. Okay, if you can see it here, when you're in a stress state, this is what your breathing rate looks like, what your heart rate variability or your stress levels look like, and your blood pressure. So this is basically the state of your stress. Your thoughts in your brain is going to be like this as well. If you notice, it's very erratic. This line here is what's called the quick coherence line, which means that when we did what we did, breathing, redirecting focus, and giving a little bit of gratitude and breathing into the area of the heart, those are all tools that bring you into this state of coherence. If you notice, the reading here is much more fluid or balanced. What happens when your respiration, when your heart rate and your blood pressure and your brain waves are balanced? What happens? The body communicates, or the mind and the body communicates the entire ecosystem of your health that we are in an optimal state. When you're in that state, that's the real you. Not when you're in a stress state. That's not you. That's not us. And the moment we stop identifying with ourselves, with how we think and feel and behave, the more we give ourselves permission to just be ourselves and permission to just feel what it is to feel like me, whatever it looks like, whatever it hurts like. Because if you want to remove the vulnerability and the weakness and the stress and the challenge, where is the growth? Where is the intimacy and the connection that we gain from one another? So one of the other things that stress does is it isolates us. We have the stigma to vulnerability, and so we don't want to talk to other people about it. We isolate ourselves from relationships, or we don't let people know about the real us, and so we never actually get that close, and we feel even more lonely. But one of the things that helps, apart from sharing our vulnerability with one another, is also understanding where it comes from. So I just want to share this brief thing. I know that we're running out of time, but I think it's very important. Why do we feel these triggers in the first place? It's important to understand why, because you're going to notice there's a pattern. When this thing happens, this trigger, I tend to think this way and feel this way and behave this way. That pattern doesn't come out of nowhere, and that pattern is not you. However, when we are an adolescent age or younger, what happens is when we're not mindful, and let's say in my family, my family, they wanted me to be excellent. And so they found many ways to encourage me to be excellent. But I did not know they were encouraging me, because all I felt like was they kept saying how to do things better and how to be better and do better. So all I was receiving as a kid was that what I am is not good enough. That's not true, because my parents, of course, they all love me, but their ways of showing it I was not mindful. And so we misinterpret. We have limiting beliefs that we develop. And so what happened to me was, I'm not good enough. And so I have to strive and overcompensate. I got to be, excellent. I get all the good grades. I got to be successful because then I'll prove my worth. And so I fed into this pattern for decades until I got general anxiety disorder. I got adrenal fatigue. I had zero self-worth. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror and say, I love you and actually mean it. Or that I was worthy. I didn't believe that. I began behaving like I wasn't worthy, but only because I believed that it was real. But the more I see now that it's just something I picked up from my past, and that why did I react that way and strive and overcompensate? I was trying to protect myself. I was trying to prove my worth so that I would be safe, so that I would be loved. And so your stress, your anxiety, the depression, all of these feelings, at the end of the day, we don't have to hate how we feel because it's there for a reason. We're just trying to protect ourselves. But these patterns no longer serve us. And a big part of this process is really recognizing that, one, we are not our patterns, but two, there's a reason why we have those patterns. Knowing where it comes from and having compassion and forgiveness for why it's there is very, very powerful. And so right before we end, I'd like to ask, as we're getting into this culture, getting used to sharing our vulnerability and understanding that what we're experiencing isn't us, can anyone share, or would anyone like to share a recurring pattern that you've noticed of when this trigger happens, that it makes you feel and think this way and always behave this way, and you feel like you keep bringing yourself in a loop, or you feel like you're getting stuck? Does anyone want to share that?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello,
Trace?
Miss. Okay, yeah.
Is it Tress?
Hello.
Or
Trece
Tracy? Tresse.
So one of the main things that I've been experiencing a lot is going back to my old habits, wherein I lose myself in the process when I feel stressed out.
Okay.
And I think one of the main triggers for those things is disorganized life. We're not working out schedules. Those are the things that triggers me a lot. And if I don't get the things the way that I wanted it to be, I tend to just shut myself from the world. And that is what is usually happening to me. And I try to be positive from time to time. And I try my best to handle it in several ways, like through meditating. But from time to time, when things get a lot more triggering, I still come back from where I used to be, or I come back to square one and try to fix myself again.
Go back to square one. So what is, when you say you shut down, what does shutting down look like?
I usually just stay inside my house. I don't talk to anyone. I shut off from social media. I don't reply to text messages in social media as well. So that is how I try to disconnect myself from the world.
Okay. And what you said, what causes this is lack of organization or things not turning out the way you want it to. Can you explain a little bit more about that, what that looks like?
I'm kind of a perfectionist, so for
Me
most
too,
time,
babe.
yeah, I'm a super perfectionist kind of person. I want everything smooth. Like, for example, my hair. I just cut my hair today, and even the side of my hair, the straight line on my hair can trigger me a lot because I want it to be perfect. But the thing that I do to try to regulate my emotions is, if I think that I needed to cut my hair straight, I would cut it on a layer, so that I will try to, like, give
Deal with
myself
it.
some chance. Yes, give myself a sense of balance. And one of the things that very common about me, because of my perfectionist attitude, I have a lot of clothes that are coordinates. I don't really
Right. You have a lot of
coordinates.
coordinates.
Clothes. Coordinate
Clothes.
clothes. Yes. I always use terno clothes, one that has one color in it, so that I won't be triggered as much when I have to think about what is the color that will match this color, something like that.
Yeah. So have you experienced I'm is anyone else a little like Tracy here, wherein like, you know, you like things a certain way and you have a certain expectation of what you should be or what other people should be. And often, you know, you mean well, you want to do well. I'm raising my hand because this is so true. But what happens is you end up what? When you keep getting tied to an outcome, if it doesn't go the way you want it to, it's a limiting belief, because then what does that mean? You lose your peace. We can't accept it. And that becomes very difficult, because what is life like? A whole lot of unexpected interruptions to our plans. And we can never control. There's so much that we can control, but there's a lot that's outside of our control. And so Tressa, when you started feeling this way, do you remember, like, have you kind of always been that way, or very particular about how things should be? And, you know, sorry, I lost your face. Yeah. Okay. There you are. Yeah. Has that always been the case? Can you remember when that first started happening? Yeah.
I think it all started when I was a kid, because as an eldest child, people in my family expects me to do more, to be more of a role model to my younger siblings. And my mom is kind of like a very organized kind of person, so I can't really make mistakes. So I think that actually give an impact to myself, that on a daily basis I have to like do things in a certain way to make it perfect. But now I'm trying to like give myself a little bit of a breather, and if something doesn't go my way, I try to inhale and exhale things, that those things are the things that you don't have control. Because all of us are living in an ecosystem. Every one of us have this
deal with each other's
yes,
decisions.
we have this some sort of responsibility. So you can't really manage everything that you have. I think that what I'm learning in this kind of journey in my life is that I have to stop micromanaging myself and the people.
Let me ask, is it your mom that's very much like this as well? Very straight-laced? And what happens when things don't go her way? How does she automatically react?
Actually, she can be violent when I was a kid.
She can be
violent.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. And how did that make you feel when she was violent? And what did it make you want to do?
I usually would just would like to do something that will make her feel like I gave her some sense of satisfaction. That's why I always do things in a perfect way. I study hard. I always clean the house for her and everything, so that she won't feel irritated or annoyed.
Okay. And so how do you think that makes, over years of adjusting yourself
At first,
to make someone happy, what do you think, what message is that sending you as a child? Like, what do you think?
for those things that has happened to me, I think that I have compromised my self-preservation, my space as well. I have forgotten how to regulate my own emotions. My parents were separated, by the way, and I have cut ties before with my mom, although I have already reconciled with her just a few months ago, which is all good. But I think I'm still learning to like regulate my emotions from time to time. But that is already the best thing that I can do for myself and also for my family.
100%. I don't mean, like, you're already on the right. You already know, because what Jessica gave a perfect example of a pattern that we carry into real life. You know, she feels like when she doesn't get things right, it automatically triggers an old memory. And that's what all of these triggers are. They do come from somewhere, and it's usually a memory. And these memories are stored by our subconscious, and our nervous system is controlled by our subconscious. So if we're afraid of snakes, then when we're walking in the woods and we see a stick, likely our heart will be able to like, I think it's a snake. It's not real, but that's my experience. If Trece continues to not have things in order, the nervous system in the past has experienced that means that there will be consequences. And so it's easier to hide or close yourself off. And what that's teaching you, like you said, is that you have to adjust yourself. But what I've learned is with those expectations, I love what you said about you still experience the waves, but you just do your best, try and be mindful and breathe through it, because that's all we can do. And over time, that's enough. That's enough. And if I may introduce or invite you, one thing that's really helped me, because I struggle with expectations a lot, is how do you surrender? How do you surrender? How do you let go? It's such a thing, you know, you're like, how do you even let go? They say, oh, let it go. Like, how do you do that? And sometimes being able to let go is just appreciating whatever season that you're in, even though it's not the season you would have chosen for yourself, but it is serving a purpose. So exchanging expectations for appreciation. Now, Teresa, having experienced what you did growing up, but seeing how it is moving you to practice being with that discomfort and reconciling things with them and being mindful that you're going to keep practicing this because it's the best way that you can be for yourself and others. Over time, what do you think is that's going to give you?
I think it's going to give me more of a sense of peace of mind. I will have more control of my emotions, although we cannot control everything, which I think I would like to just say for everyone. And this will also give me more chance to focus on what is going to give me better achievements in the future, rather than those things that will set me back.
Yeah, absolutely. Because thank you so much for that. Because as you're doing this and practicing, you'll be more yourself. And at the end of the day, what happens, why we get tripped up or why we get lost, because we at some point decided that ourselves were not good enough. And so that we had to be someone else. We had to try different things or adjust ourselves or make ourselves more or prove more. And so then we get lost, maybe even doing things that we didn't even want to do for ourselves. The moment we get to practice being with those experiences, the more we can detach ourselves from it, the more we can detach ourselves from the noise. Because at the end of the day, what are your thoughts and notifications? Sorry, your thoughts and emotions. They're just like notifications, like on a phone. Do you open every notification? No, some of it is junk. Some of it is bulk. Some of it is fake news. If you keep reacting to every single thing you think and every single thing you feel, then you're going to be influenced by our circumstances and our past trauma. But the moment you begin to interrupt the cycle and begin to just allow yourself, that's sometimes the hardest, but the most important thing to do, Blaise Pascal said, is for a human being to sit quietly in a room alone and be okay. So I highly recommend each of us to develop this practice of simply learning to be with whatever's happening, to breathe through it, to not identify with the experience. Now, it's not easy, it's hard, but to just be with it and breathe through it, like what Tressa said. And over time, trust me from experience, this is what is slowly building our sense of control over ourselves and our ability to choose how we show up over time. And what I highly recommend with this group is how we're going to be able to continue this process is I highly recommend, if you want to take this, raise your hand if this is a practice that you want to develop for yourself so that you can show up better for yourself and others. Okay, girls, you all have met each other. You all have a contact over one another. One of the strongest things about this session that we have done, hands down for me, is hearing your stories, is sharing. Because the minute you talk about it, you're not stuck in there. You can process it. It's what you're experiencing. And the more that you can create a handful of people that you can meet with one another, the more we can give each other borrowed eyes. Because sometimes, many times, myself included, we don't believe we are worthy. And sometimes we need borrowed eyes to show us what's real. I'll close with a little bit of a story. When I was super striving and a bit of a perfectionist as well, I got into the habit of lying to people because I didn't want to be judged for the truth. And so it was easier for me to paint a picture, including when I was unhappy with my ex-husband, that I thought I needed to be there and stick by him and be a good partner. I ended up having an affair and continuing to lie about it and being in denial because I was so afraid and not telling anyone because I felt so hungry for approval and validation and worth. I ended up